Welcome to the Gotland Game Talk for project managers and to the game design department at Uppsala University. My name is Lina Source-Emilsson. I'm your host here today. I am also a researcher and a teacher in game design for project management at Campus Gotland. The Gotland Game Talk is an open seminar series where everyone interested is welcome. It is also part of the curriculum for bachelor students studying the game design and project management program at Uppsala University. The format of this seminar is that I will have a conversation with an invited guest for 30 minutes about a pre-announced subject. This part of the seminar is recorded and you can ask your question in the chat. After 30 minutes, we will stop the recording and open up for a shared Q&A session where you can continue to send your questions in the chat, but you will also be able to unmute yourself and ask the question yourself. Today is our guest, Philip Svanfeldt. He is a business developer and advisor that during 7 years was part of the game development entity Acabo Games. This is a company that was developed and sold physical board games with an educational purpose at a higher level for university students and executives, such as senior management and consultants. At Acabo Games, Philip acted as head of Swedish operations, CEO, and head of international sales. He was also part of leading to sell the company in 2016. Today, Philip is joining us to share his knowledge, experience, and thoughts on how to start a board game company as a student and what it means practically and personally to bring the company to the international market and then take the decision to make and execute an exit for the company. Philip, welcome. Glad to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
I made a short introduction about you, but it would be fantastic to hear your own words, who you are and what your passion is and how this passion has impacted your professional journey.
Happy to. Well, if you're going to listen to myself for about 30 minutes, maybe it's good to see if this guy actually knows what he's talking about. I don't know, but maybe I can answer a few questions and tips and tricks about starting, running, and also exiting some kind of game developing entity, in this case for physical board games. So myself, I would say I'm definitely the generalist, the guy connecting the dots and the people. I today work with business development and learning and development, etc., etc. And very short, my journey has been through a lot of different companies, mostly in project manager roles and also as a consultant manager. But what's common about it and what my passion really is, which is also actually what the university newspaper fronted on one of their magazines on the front page, make your passion your business, and my face on it. So that is really what it's all about. So one thing is that I connect marketing and sales people on one hand with like research and development people on one hand, and they get together, normally not talking so well with one another, and have one foot in both worlds, so to speak. And also the other thing I could say, if you see me standing on the side oiling the hamster wheel where everybody's running, everything is moving forward, but I'm trying to get everybody to run in the same direction, more or less. That's my passion.
So how did your professional journey start, and what have you been doing during these years, and what are you doing today? So we just have that before we go into talk more about your company.
Sure. Well, we'll get back to academic board games, which is Acabo Games is short for. But that is actually my first company. Well, not my, but we were a bunch of 8 people. I will get back to that later. And I have a biomedical background, so I've been project manager within medtech, and I've also been working a lot on the field with different medical companies, all sizes, in mostly Uppsala and Mälardalen region, but also on the West Coast.
So let's get into game development companies.
Sure.
Let's talk about Akabo Games. Can you tell us about this company, the market you use, the product you have, so we have a picture when we go in and talk more in detail about developing a board game company?
Sure. Well, we start with the company. It's a stock company, typical Swedish aktiebolag, and we started it in 2010. And it's actually kind of a fun story because I was a part of the School of Entrepreneurship at Uppsala University, and suddenly 3 guys appeared, finishing it 3 years earlier, and they said like, well, we really missed a sharp project when we took part of this school. So maybe you want to join us on this journey. And I was like, that sounds cool. And what it is about? Yeah, it's about board games, which is kind of my passion privately, which I have about 100 titles in my bookshelf. So I'm definitely a nerd on that subject. So that was a dream come true. And I was like, this can teach me everything I need to know about running a company. And also I can do it for board games. So we founded the company in 2010, 8 people. We had the 3 older guys and the 3 from this class, and a graphics guy and an 8th edition. So it was a great team.
So what was the market that you were targeting? We mentioned that a little bit. And what was your product when you started up?
So our first product, which comes with, of course, doing your lesson with the product market fit, was a board game called The Art of Science. It's a green box, and very shortly you can describe it as a trivia game, like Trivial Pursuit, but only with the green category questions. So nature and science, which of course is a super, super niche market. But then again, when we found the right audience, everybody was thrilled, to say the least. So, and the other product that we launched was Guesstimates, which is about numbers and, of course, like how many zebra crossings are there in Sweden, or how many turrets are there on the Chinese wall? The answer is, of course, irrelevant, but the process of learning how to break down such a complex problem really helps in job interviews, for example. So those 2 were the main products, and I think the market the answer to your question about which market comes with it.
So let's talk about product development and then go into the company development. So when you develop a product, as the students as you were, how did you go about it, and how did you do it to understand? Did you already know that was going to be a very niched product that they were going for? How did it look back then, like 2010, I think it was, right?
Well, it's a happy mix of gods. Why did we even try this crazy, where we had no idea what we were doing? And the other part of me says that I'm really proud of us all in the whole team that we took this endeavor. So talking about product development, I would say it's definitely not what you will be doing if you start a game entity. We thought like, great, developing board games, that's going to be awesome. And we had a pipeline of about 1,000 ideas, which 100 of them were plausible. And then we had 10 games we wanted to launch the same year. And we launched 1 game and produced, of course, and all that. We get into that as well, and realized that is a massive undertaking, and 99% of our time instead of product development was about sales and marketing and getting the company running. So, and another answer to that question is, of course, how did we do it? And I think the key lesson here is the iteration: test, 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 and test again. So you start small with the pipeline and the funneling coming in, and you think about, is this even possible? And you do your homework again about product market fit, and you start trying small, and try bigger and bigger and fail fast, and then you will eventually succeed with one product. So test groups were, the one key. If I should pick one thing from the entire process of starting small, and then we had 4 phases. We don't have time to go into how we thought about that, but you're very, very happy to answer all the questions about that as well. But the larger and larger, and the more and more groups we tried it on, and we sat there and just encouraged them to speak their mind and feel safe in the environment to give feedback. And regardless of how much we tested, we still found flaws. I mean, way past launching date. So that's the key.
So how did the company journey look like? You met in 2009, I guess, somewhere, and you established the company around the entity around 2010. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then you went on to 2016. So how did it look? If we start let's take the startup,
Sure.
producing, and then we go into the finalizing, and we have stuff here we're going to dig into more detail around that also. But if we start the journey, so we get like a picture, what does it mean when you start up a game design company?
Yeah, so if I hook on to the previous story I mentioned about us 8 meeting up, and then of course choosing a title and trying to get it 100% developed as soon as possible, and then of course, okay, we need to produce this somewhere. So that was one of the larger questions we asked very early on in this journey. Like, okay, we could go Germany, which is very high-end produce, or we could go China, which is the complete opposite of the spectra. I mean, nothing is better or worse than the other. It's just very different from one another. And then our decision actually came down to Poland, which is in the middle of that spectra. And we had a fairly good quality to decent price, but most of all, a terrific relation with the supplier that we chose.
How did you find them, the supplier? Where do you go to find suppliers?
Exactly. How do you start a game? It's like, I need a producer. Where do I start? It's crazy. Of course, you do some digging, and I see a couple of friendly faces listening here as well, which helped us out very much with that. Thank you for that. And also, there is a big exhibition, a fair in Germany. Germany is the heart of the Euro Games. So both in Essen, which I guess a lot of you people know about, you can go as a consumer and buy a lot of board games once a year, all the new titles. But the other half of the year, there is actually a producer fair in Nuremberg as well, where the public is not invited. So it's only producers and all those big dragons. So we went there year after year after year. And this is actually a kind of a key moment for us, where you go there first year and they like look at you, it's like, yeah, all right, you're one of 100 million who want to take up our time and show their product, which is terrific, all of those thousands of products. And then the year after is like, hey, I've seen you before. And then the third year is like, are you still around? That's cool. Now we're getting really interested. So we were about this close many times to get the dragons on the hook and produce, thousands of titles in one go. But well, in the end, things came in between, so we didn't have that luxury.
So how did you find the company in Poland? How did you get money to produce?
So we, of course, then we found the producer on that fair, and then of course you need a little bit of money. But I think we can get back to the real funding question later. But for now, just to answer it, we started out with our own cash, really. So all the 8 of us chipped in with what we had and produced first a mock-up, which is insanely expensive to get one board game, which is completely white, and you can feel all the cardboard, and you get like, when you choose color for your wall paintings at home, you get the same with different cards and thicknesses and glossinesses and yeah, all that. So and after that we produced, and then again, that's also a key take home for you guys. It's all about volume. If you produce very few titles, it's insanely expensive for every unit. And also if you produce a lot of, like talking about 10,000 copies or something, it's also insanely expensive because every unit costs. So I think the golden standard is to get at least to 1,000 copies, and if you can, to maybe up to 5,000 copies for a board game, which is really scary to do the first time. Trust me.
Let's move back a little bit. You had your team. You said you were 8 of you. I guess the team is crucial here to make things happen. Could you tell us a little about your team, the roles, and how you work together, how you manage to keep on the same path with the same north, all of you, like we're going there?
Yeah, This is going to give you the more emotional part of this talk, I think, but that's also what you want to get into, I guess. So it has not been a journey of roses, maybe thorny ones. It's been a real roller coaster, ups and downs, and I'm totally transparent in sharing all the pros and cons of doing this. But the thing that kept us together, I really want to emphasize on this, is the team, because we were not a bunch of friends, and we were not like formally colleagues from before. We just met 8 random people, not knowing anything about one another, but we had that passion. Again, the word passion. We want to do this, and we had a very similar vision of what we wanted to do. That's the glue here. And we had a lot of different roles. Lina, you mentioned a couple of roles that myself had. Of course, I didn't have all of those at the same time. It's about throughout the period of 7 years. But one role could be Sweden operations, of course, since that's our home country, and it's easier to go around to bookshops and different retailers to get their attention. And then, of course, we have a very niche product, so we knew that we needed to go very broad, very global, fast, which is also something I maybe didn't really mention about the product development. We translated the games to a lot of different languages, which was a massive undertaking in itself. We can ask you about that if you want to. So then we had the connection with production. Somebody needs to take care of that. We had marketing. We had, of course, keeping the company together, some form of flat Swedish hierarchy in the beginning, but as it formalized more and more, we had a CEO, and then we also had an external CEO for a while. Then we had all the development connections. Somebody needed to coordinate all those groups, shipping in with feedback, and the graphics guy, etc., etc. So it's a lot of different roles which we mixed and married throughout this period of time.
How did you do that? How did you decide who does what?
Well, some might agree with me here, and some of you might not. So it just happened, actually. I would say that's how it feels like now, afterwards anyway. It's 5 years ago. Because I'm interested in this. I have some previous knowledge about this, or we try out and somebody was successful in, we had about 50 entries in the Swedish newspapers for the first 4 months. It's insane, 50. And the one of us who was responsible for that, of course, like, you do this awesomely, you do that, and I do this, and then we help each other out, of course. But just kind of happens where the passion is again.
Is there something you like to add about the team that I have not asked you before we move on into marketing and sales? Something you think like this is important to bring in?
Of course, it's the aspect of not getting paid. Maybe that's pretty important, because nobody had any salary until we actually, we'll get to that, to the investor relation part. But in the first years, I think it was the first 3 years, we had only our own money and the money that the company made, and our expenses were huge. And of course, we also our capital was bound in our stock. We had a lot of board games, but if you can't translate that into money, then you will have a pretty interesting cash flow in the end. We'll get back to that also. So another key take home for you guys today is think about what everybody's time is worth, and you can always work out different things, and you probably heard about sweat equity and stuff like that. But my very personal recommendation is to treat everybody's time equal. If somebody knows fancy pantsy law and somebody's just packing boxes, don't value one task over the other. And if you're gonna get paid in somehow, you with what we did was shuffle around some shares in the company in the end. And the year or 1 or 2 years before we actually sold the company, 2 people also quit, so we bought their shares to get a little bit of a carrot to keep going.
So let's talk money. Let's talk about how to work with and without money, without a budget. And what does it mean to go international?
Well, it's tough to work without a budget in so many ways. I also ended up with not getting my last salary paid, actually, when we finished the company, because we had no money left, because everything was bound in board games. So that can happen, and that's also something you need to take into account. That can I work with this? What happens with my private life? And also, on another account than money, I want you guys to really think about topping up the account on the plus account, because sharing and helping each other out when it dips, especially money-wise, really helps out, because it will. And if you have given and given and given, then it's easier to take in the end. But if you haven't given enough first, then it's really can get quite messy with the emotions there. So that's also one thing. And of course, another very different perspective about working without a budget is marketing. How do you do it? You can't really go and buy expensive ads somewhere. So you really have to. We called it guerrilla marketing. So we just drove around and scouted out every event that we could. And after, I think when we were in our prime days, I would say a majority of all the students at Uppsala University studying at least tech or science or even more than that, they had a clue of what we were doing and what the products were about. So it's about being present and going around to different campuses and companies. I mean, I've been giving a lecture about these board games and playing the board games with Accenture and the Swedish Armed Forces and Ernst & Young, etc. A lot of like management programs as well. So really be creative. Without the money, you have to be more creative, and that's why this is fun.
So how did you get investors, and when did you get investors? Was it like 3 years in after you have, or what, did you get the investors earlier, and how did you find them, and how did you get them to invest in you?
Sure. So we talked about marketing, we talked about sales, which is, again, if I said development is about test, then the only thing you need to think about apart from that is sales, because development is a very tiny bit of what you will be doing if you sell physical board games. And in the end, that won't get you as far as you want if you want to do the leverage and not grow organically, because if you use a very niche market and the product like we did, you definitely will need investors somehow. So we thought about going to a lot of different angels and even venture capitalists, and then the larger we went, they just like, you need to get, sorry, you need to get much further than this. So it actually ended up, to make a long story short, with a very odd investor, which is actually the Uppsala University. And we pitched it the way that we started the game at the School of Entrepreneurship. That's where it came from. It's about learning things you learn at the exam at university, and also we had such close connection to it. So the holding company of Uppsala University finally chipped in with some money for shares in the company.
And what difference did that make for the team and for the company? Now you were working with money. So what does it mean to work with money?
Well, you get,
what's different?
You get paid for starters. That's fun. And so doing this, of course, really it's about trust and relation and living up to that expectation. If people throw a lot of money at you, you really need to deliver. And we thought like the big shift here was, well, let me pause that thought. Let me summarize the history for you a little bit first, because what I meant with ups and downs and roller coaster is that 2008, for example, there was an economic crisis, as some of you might remember, and the aftermath of that, when we thought we really needed to go global, we spent all our last money on the UK and Spain, and to get the suppliers, which were like their own entities, selling our board games, passionate people, up and running. But that economic crisis really slaughtered everything, and both of them just went bankrupt. So every money we threw into that just went haywire. And then also we were running out of cash, and then we thought like, hey, let's choose a cheaper producer. That might solve our problem. Don't do that. Because if you have a good relation, that is worth so much more than saving a few bucks on physical cardboard. So what we did was that we changed the producer to another one in Poland, and it just went crappy products, much more development time, much more production time, which made it actually more expensive in the end. So all those things up and down, and then we went into what's the word, like kontrollbalansräkning is the balance sheet for liquidation purposes that you have in stock companies, that the tax authorities want to know that you have enough cash, because that was the problem. The cash flow wasn't really where we wanted it to be. So that was the history. Let's get back to the thought. Help me out, Lina. I was onto something there.
I don't know, but how do you, we were talking about what is different when you have money and how you work with money. But I also like us to get into the discussion about actually you sold the company, because what I heard is like,
sure.
it wasn't a roller coaster, ups and down. And then you had this very big hit where the economy went down everywhere. Yeah. And that was 2000 and help me out here.
2000 and every year. I would say at least once during every of those 7 years, we were close to bankruptcy. And in the other end, we were like flying on clouds. So it was really a roller coaster. And what the money really changed was that I could go in and we could hire a guy keeping track of all the economics finally. And we really invested 6 months with really heavy expenses on salary that we finally could get paid. And we said like, this is where we will take off from the starting runway. And we almost did. In the end, we did not. And after 7 years of turning every stone, we just realized that we have changed. Everybody has gotten kids. We had really trying to value the relationship with our investor and did everything that we could, but together we decided like, this is not going to fly the way we want to. Now we really try this with us as a team. And the only option we found, to make a long story short, was that we found the largest retailer in Sweden. They're called World of Board Games, situated in Umeå. And we have met them many times, and they came with a lot of awesome tips and tricks that helped us throughout the years. And they were interested enough and kind enough to buy all the rights, all the production material, the digital copies to make more board games, but also our physical stock, and sold them throughout a couple of years until they ran out. And in the end, I don't know actually why they decided not to print the games again, but also, if you do a board game in 2010, a lot of the world around changes and the question gets outdated. So that's a big job as well. So I think that's the reason. So we sold the board games and the rights to them and made not a terrific grand exit with all the fireworks and now I'm rich and all that. It was not a necrosis, it was an apoptosis. It was a controlled shutdown, and it was an exit, and everybody was happy. We were content with what we accomplished and what we learned. And I'm still very proud today to see 10,000s of copies of the games and people like, have you made this board game, etc. That's what I live on. So
soon it's time for us to go into Q&A session. We can take all of the questions that the audience have. But before we do that, what are the main learnings that you got from this journey that you think anyone in this Zoom room that are thinking about starting a game developing entity should have with them?
Okay, sure. I just summarize, I think, what I've already mentioned, because this, most of you guys I know thinking about the development phase mainly. And then the main take home is test, test, and test. Go larger and larger with larger audience, different audiences, and just try it out as much as you can, as many different ways as you can. But that's not the important part. Running a game development entity is about sales. Otherwise, you won't survive. So therefore, I say sales, sales, sales. That's what you need to focus on early on, and really keep an extra eye on the cash flow. buy an immense stock which you cannot sell and turn over fast enough. That will really stop and halt both your passion and also the progress that you could make. I can actually throw in some extra, which I didn't mention before. If you don't know about the forming, storming, norming, performing process, Google that. That will help you. Also, there's another one called Leary's Rose, when you get into opposition with somebody where you can transfer to another place and maybe make more products. I definitely recommend the Leary's Rose. And also maybe a final note is everything that I said today was a board game company that we started 10 years ago and finished off of 7 years ago. And today is completely different. There's a lot of trends with digital things coming into the physical, etc., etc. So really do your homework, what the world is about now and not then.
Will we see you in the game design market again, Philip? Will you join in and get going?
How could I stop? So I mentioned that I also work with learning and development, and I'm so much into gamification. And if you're going to learn something, it has to be fun, otherwise it won't work. So I think some kind of game development will definitely be a big part of my life.
Thank you, Philip, for being here with us today. And we will soon stay here because we will go into the Q&A session. And before we do that, I like to thank you as well as every guest we had during this semester, because this is the last Gotland Game Talk we will have during 2022. And it's been a fantastic ride and we learned so much from everyone. I also like to say a big thanks to the audience and to the fantastic students we had with us during these talks and for all the questions you have asked.